Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Lachlan.
Nice to see you all. Just give it a moment. Hey, Lino, I'll just see who else we've got coming in. I think we have a few registered for this morning, which is nice.
Hi, Lachlan.
Hello, hello. Whilst we just give people one moment, I will drop a link into the chat to the board that I'm using today to present from, with today's session being on audience engagement tools. So I'll get into that in just a moment. Convenient excuse, Joe. Heard it many times. I like the Zoom has stolen all power over my webcam. I can't possibly use it. Yeah.
Teams has played up this week for me, I tell you. I'm over it.
Okay, I will actually say that I'm having some frustrations with Teams this week as well because of the whole new Teams and old Teams. Like they've sort of changed the tool availability for different stuff in Teams, whether it's the look and feel or the functionality, and sometimes that really annoys me. Particularly the calendar in Teams has changed a bit. But anyway, not to get too distracted from the topic at hand. Today's session is around audience engagement tools, and particularly we're going to be looking at two tools that Charles Sturt University has an enterprise license for. So what that means is that they are supported, that you have unlimited access to the tools and their functionality, and that for the foreseeable future, that's not changing, right? So that's important in a space where I guess all too often we find tools that we think look fit for purpose and look great and offer great functionality, etc., but we have limited availability to the tool set, or worse, we just can't get them to work in our environment. So that is not the case with Mentimeter and Zoom. And so we're going to be looking at the functionality of those two tools today. So what I'm going to do is start presenting from this deck, and this is a session where there will be some interaction required of sorts, but nothing too arduous, I promise. So let's talk a little bit about audience engagement tools. I'm going to run you through a little bit of context. We're going to go through the functionality of Mentimeter itself as our main audience engagement platform. And then I'm going to talk about the tools that are built into Zoom. Polls, quizzes, and surveys. They are all quite different. You might be aware of some of them. I will just mute a little bit. That's a bit better. Okay, so let's get right into it. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a link in front of you all and see if you know what to do with it. If I drop this straight into the chat for Mentimeter and say there's a link, otherwise referred to as a participant link, I am hoping that you will click on that and start doing some things with it. It's going to prompt you for some responses and should open in a window looking something like this. And you'll need to make some responses and work through, let's say 4 or 5 questions very quickly. So all I've given you is a participant link. Now, whilst you're clicking and doing things in this space, what I'm going to be doing is having a look at a results page at the same time on my screen that I'm sharing with my audience. So at the same time as the 6 or 7 out of 8 people accessing this board down the bottom here, it's telling me who's doing what. are putting in responses. At the moment, this is telling me that at the moment, everyone said, I'm unsure, keep going, which is good. No one said, I'm all over it. Maybe I should have said that. I'll now move through to a second activity that people are starting to put into a word cloud, which is updating live. Someone's bringing a dachshund to a desert island. I like it. I like it a lot. We won't let the
Only
dog play with
Valerie
the.
did. Only Valerie, the dachshund who survived Kangaroo Island for 20 months or whatever.
That's perfect. I can't think of a better companion or choice.
Yeah.
Is she handy with a knife, lighter, water, etc.? That would all be handy as well.
Yeah.
So the word cloud's updating as we speak. Again, I can see 5 out of 8, 6 out of 8 people. It is resizing. Size of the words being the more people mention something, the larger the text gets. It's standard for a word cloud, but it is updating in real time as people put the results in. Second activity type. Third activity type, two truths and a lie. You may be familiar with this format where you need to make a choice. You'll probably find that people are being asked to identify what is the lie. Most of you seem to think that me being scared of clowns might be the lie, which is interesting. I will address this question in just a moment. And I can see again, 6 out of 8 people have responded. Then we have a scales activity asking you along a continuum to identify some priorities for you. In a home office, it looks like people above everything else want a good Wi-Fi signal. You can see that showing. I can see averages and trends. What else can I see here? A little bit of color. Absolute must-haves. Multiple monitors. No one wants a bar fridge except for one person at the moment. Having a place for the dog or the cat. Also trending upwards, shall we say. Good to see. Moving right along, we now have a ranking activity. So instead of a continuum with you identifying how much something is important, they're asking you to rank. And these will shift and change, as you can see happening here. You're opening the fridge. What are the things that you want above other things? And KFC is in the top half. Fascinating. Okay, 5 out of 8. And then the last one that we're looking at this point is an activity that requires you to think about resource management. With 100 points to spend, what are you allocating in terms of your activity? This one's asking you about Saturdays. What are you doing with your time? And I can see a lot of people are investing in meeting with friends. We have a new front runner, reading books, bit of cooking, getting out and about. No video games. Right then. What we've just done in this space is work through 5 different distinct activity types in Mentimeter with virtually no instruction to the audience. You got a link, you work through it. Each of them required the audience to engage in a different way, some of them being very, very simple. So for example, a multiple choice question, in which case you had 3 choices, you chose one and it visually updated. And in the case of Mentimeter, it could have been as a bar graph. We got it as a donut, which was updating as people put results in. It could have been a pie chart if we wanted that. And there's even a mapping of dots against the individual responses. You then engaged with a word cloud response, which just allowed people to put in a certain number of responses and it just updated on the spot. Notice that we had the image to drop in a visual prompt as well, or an image against the activities if you want your audience to see those. We then got into the 2 truths and a lie, which is a type of multiple choice. And effectively what it's wanting you to identify is the correct answer. So it is a multiple choice activity. And the correct answer in this case is the lie as such is no, I'm not scared of clowns. I do have a pirate ancestor, for those of you curious about it. All right. We then looked at our scales activity, where in building this activity, I had defined a continuum. how many values, so from 0 to 5 along my continuum. And I also got to outline as many of these choices for people to add their scales along the way. You probably don't want more than about 8. You start to lose traction because of the sheer how busy the text and the options are on the one page. So with a scales type activity, you probably want somewhere around 4 or 5 is maybe your magic number, really. Yes, Robin, absolutely true. We had a ranking activity. Again, very simple. You outline the choices available and then you let it free, and people have to allocate top to bottom. And then the resource management activity is called 100 points in Mentimeter language, where you get to define, I guess, the layout of those in a list and ask people to break down the 100 points amongst those options. So going back to our presentation, all I gave you was a participant link. I was referring to the results page to look at the live results, and away we went very, very quickly. So audience engagement tools, what are they? I'm going to talk through the obvious here for a second, which is that these are forms of interaction or participation. Sometimes they can lift the energy or the mood, particularly in online environments where a lot of the time we drift towards a very didactic sort of approach to delivery and teaching, which is I talk, you listen, for example, or I'm presenting at you. It's very passive. Audience engagement tools in online environments and also face-to-face are intended to, let's say, lift the needle in terms of the other people in the room, getting them involved in what's going on, and also allow you as the educator in the space some other affordances, like being able to take a breath, pause, get sort of composed or targeted in terms of where you're going with your delivery. It can do things like ice breaking. It can allow your questioning or your audience to identify what their needs are in that space, to identify where they've got problems or lacks of understanding without necessarily just stopping and saying, right, I'm going to stop there. Whoever's got a problem, you can now talk. This is something that can flow a little bit more seamlessly and at the same time. So as I said, it's an opportunity to get feedback, ideas, opinions. At the same time, it can also make your audience feel valued, that them being there is actually an important thing rather than I'll just watch the recording. It can provide alternative channels to get feedback, etc. And in many cases, particularly Mentimeter and some of the tools we'll be looking at today, it's something that can be done both live and in person. And if you know how to do it, it can be done asynchronously. And that's when we start talking about embedding audience engagement activities, either within your content, in your subject sites, or just giving them links to things through your other types of communications, and you can get their feedback and engagement via those as well. So we'll have a look at doing those things, which leads to questions around when are we doing it? When do you want them to engage? Before, during, after, etc. And I can see people going away in the chat, which is great. And I'm ecstatic that you've been, a number of you have been using this tool as well. Robin, go ahead.
Embedding it in PowerPoint doesn't work for me anymore. So is that turned off? Someone told me you couldn't do that anymore.
That's an excellent question. So there is a Mentimeter plugin for PowerPoint, which allows you to embed live activities, Mentimeter activities in the deck. Unfortunately, when we're using Charles Sturt University licenses for things, particularly Microsoft products, there are limitations on plugins or additions to the platform beyond the standard what's offered. So there's the problem. You can't install the plugin to CSU PowerPoint, which would allow you to embed the Mentimeter activity, which means that you're limited to things like giving them the participant link, providing QR codes and things like that. But there is a plugin, and if you're running it from your own device and your own instance of PowerPoint, you could install it and use it.
I
That's the
used to
problem.
embed them in, but now it won't let me anymore. So I was just wondering about that. Thanks.
No problem. All right, let's go one step further. I'm not quite sure why my Padlet deck is freaked out a little bit, but let's have a look at one other type or way of approaching this before we start going through the Mentimeter toolset. I've given you another Mentimeter activity type in the chat. Click on that and have a look. It should be opening up in this screen. And I'll just talk through this one. Feel free to click through and add some things without any detail, really. I just want you to get the idea of how a sequenced set of Mentimeter activities might work. This one is asking a student to think about how they're like a progress indicator working on an assessment. So how's the task going? How much progress have I made in regards to the following areas? So background research, okay, I've done all of that. Have I located all of the relevant content, etc.? Sure. Have I looked through the subject outline? I haven't, but I'm going to skip that. Have I scrutinized the marking rubric? Oh, sort of. Have I put in draft attempts to turn it in, etc., etc.? So we work through those progress indicators. This is a scales Menti. Then we submit. And then it's a drag and drop type response saying, which one of these elements of the task are you struggling most with? And I'm going to say, the conclusion. And then I can drag and drop more of them. So this is a ranking activity where we use drag and drop to identify what our priorities are. I'm going to keep going. I seriously have a facilities guy who's pulled out a whippersnipper outside my window. Love this joint. You could not write this stuff. No, it's better. It's a chainsaw. Oh, great. Okay. All right. So look, that activity type, I'm going to open the results page again, is used quite commonly in a number of subjects to try and give the teacher an indication of student readiness for assessment without necessarily having to run a face-to-face session themselves. So they want to sort of do a check a couple of weeks before the assessment is due. And if some of the areas identified in there, such as the parts that students are struggling with the most or have made the least progress, so final submission, that makes sense to me, a revised draft, etc. What else is trending down? Looking at the marking rubric, maybe this is an indication to me that I might do something along those lines. A recording, for example, looking at those things, if I made a 5-minute recording of me walking through the marking rubric and the things that I'm looking for and releasing that to students. Maybe if it was a problem in terms of structure, I could tee up the academic skills team to run a session around something. It's just a different way of surveying students along these lines. So I'm not going to dwell too long on these different things. I can see that the 7 people that engaged in this activity, it looks like the case study is the one that's troubling you all the most, for example, and then we move through the list to sort of identify which problems there are. So there's also an open text area where people got to drag and drop, etc., their sections. So getting started, easiest part, right? And then people just putting in text. Okay, you get the idea. So we have a sequenced series of questions which are supposed to help me identify what else I might need to do in this regard, and potentially also prodding the students just to give them a reminder that we're approaching that point and you should be thinking about these things. So I'm not going to be identifying these different areas if I didn't expect students to know that this is kind of the steps towards you actually completing this task. So it's potentially, I'm not going to say devious, let's just say a fairly strategic way of reminding students of the intended sort of workflow and process that we hope they're working towards in completing the task. So I'll stop there. Joe, you don't mind that approach? What do you think?
I was just typing it. I just think that is awesome to capture like through the subject stuff before assessments, and like I'm always like I'm doing it tonight, but I think this would be fantastic for my first year students that are doing, because the subject that I teach into in the Birth to Five is one of the first ones that they do. So it's just a really great way to just check, but also remind them that they need to get back on track with things as well. I really like it. So Lachlan, do you suggest, like, would you put it in, like, how would you go about putting this in your Brightspace? Would you do a link in an announcement, or, when you're just checking outside of an online session kind of thing?
So the short answer is I would do two things. One of them is I would actually embed this into the content within the site somewhere, so that it is visible on the page for students to be thinking out at a particular point that I want them to be looking at it, right? So if that's at the end of maybe where my third topic is, or my third week, or whatever the case might be, I want it embedded and visible somewhere within the subject site. So that's one way of making it available to the students. The other thing is I would be sending out a comms, exactly as you said, a communication, telling them that it's there and giving them the link to participate with it at the time that I want them thinking about it. So targeted comms to give them the participant link and saying, right, this is a great time for you to be thinking about this. You may have come across already in the, topic 3 content, this progress checker for your assessment. I'll be looking at your feedback on those results, and potentially if we need to run a session or provide other opportunities to talk about some of these problem areas, we'll do so before we hit that point where it is already at time.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks, Lachlan. And the other thing, I did type it in the chat, but I used it for the first time with this particular group of students that I have for one of their very first subjects, just to gauge how they felt, because I was looking at reviewing one of the assessments. And so I just gathered some insights in how because it's the group discussion. I think you know about this assessment, Lachlan, because you helped me set it up. But the group assessment assignment where they engage in a group forum. So I wanted to gather some really, insights into that without waiting for the surveys. And
Absolutely.
it was really great. It was really great because then that helped inform the work that I did on it, because I revised it a bit based on that. So really, really helpful. And Trish Briggs, big shout out to Trish, because she got me inspired to use Mentimeter more. So I had to go with it, and loved
Excellent.
it. Loved it.
I'm glad to hear it. Lino, you're up next, and then we're going to start working through the build and the interface in terms of using Mentimeter.
Thank you. I was using Mentimeter in my Zoom tutorials, but I paid for it myself because I didn't know we had access to it.
Mm-hmm.
So and then when I found out we had access to it, I didn't pay the next year, but I couldn't find it, and I couldn't work out how to do it in PowerPoint, which you've explained now. But how can I use it in my lectures?
Right.
How do the students see it?
Okay, so we're talking face-to-face or online?
Online.
Okay. So what you want for the students, there are multiple ways that you can engage with Mentimeter as a student. The most common one is that you're giving people a link, like I've done in our Teams meeting. So me dropping a link straight into the chat and saying to the audience, right, click on the participation link. There are, in fact, 3 or 4 different bits of information in Zoom that you can give people, or you could put that participation link in an announcement if you wanted to give it to them in advance for them to engage with an activity. But I'm going to show you those different ways of using it, and also how to access the CSU version of it.
How do you find it?
Yeah, no worries.
And I have to go at 10:30. Apologies, but I'll watch the rest of it.
No worries. All right, I'm under the pump. I'm going to give you the express version of some of that information. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start in a new browser and say that we begin this process by going to mentimeter.com. this is where we either sign in or sign up. And on the homepage for Mentimeter, top right-hand corner, you'll see login and sign up. And if you're going to be doing either of those things, the language that we're looking for here is SSO, single sign-on. So if I click on sign up, down the bottom there is that SSO link. So at that point, it's going to ask, who are you signing up with, which institution? So in this case, I could put Charles Sturt University, or I could also put in my email address. And then it takes you to a CSU page prompting you for your CSU credentials. And that's how you get in and access Mentimeter. Every time from that point on, when you go to log in, you would be looking for that language, SSO, single sign-on. So let me load it again. This time around, assuming I've signed up, I'm going to go log in, find single sign-on, SSO. There it is. And I'll put in my email address. And then it asks me to sign in with my CSU credentials. So it's a handshake across to our existing systems. And then it will sign me in. You'll probably get one of these lovely duo pushes. If you're familiar with those on our systems, is this me? Yes, it's definitely me. You might need to do that the first time. And then it opens up our Mentimeter dashboard, our homepage. All right, so what I'm going to focus on is a brief description of the dashboard, and then we're going to build some mentees. On your homepage, you'll notice in the top left-hand side, there's an area that talks about your presentations, which means if you've built them, they're going to be in a list here. You can create folders to organize your different Mentimeter activities. So if I looked at, for example, the ones I use for PD, which are called PD workshops, and then inside that folder, it has a list of all of the different Mentimeter activities that I've built over time. You can search through the whole thing if you can't find it. And if you've ever had someone else share their Mentimeter activities with you as a collaborator, which I'll show you how to do, you'd also be able to click on shared with me, and it would help you find those if you hadn't built them. Underneath that, there is an area called Charles Sturt University Workplace, and that is, you can click on this area under Workplace and build Mentimeter activities that will then be visible and available to everyone else at the uni, right? Other staff members. So we have different teams across the uni who build Menti activities that they want colleagues and peers to also have access to be able to use without having to add in individual email addresses and add them as collaborators each time. So they build a shared Menti inside these workspace areas. That's the difference between just creating it yourself under the My Presentations area and making them in the shared space. Okay, and again, you can create folders in there to help organize them. Looks like some people have done it in terms of the programs that they're running. Others have done it in terms of subjects. You could do it as a teaching team or however you like. But individual Mentimeter presentations and folders for you to organize them. Those are the two things that you're looking for on your homepage, your dashboard. I'm going to go into the My Presentations area to start this process. And I'm going to start by creating a new Menti. Okay, so I want you to think about Mentimeter the way that we think about PowerPoint. That's the language we have here. We have Mentimeter presentations. Inside the presentation, we have a number of slides that you'll see here along the left. And I can add multiple slides. And on those slides, if I want to, I can have activities, interactive activities to put on each. So for each slide in your presentation, you can have one Mentimeter activity, and you can see some of those activity types in here. Multiple choice, word cloud, open-ended if you just want to capture text, scales activities, ranking, etc., etc. All the ones we went through and more. These are for you to play around with and have a look at. But on the Padlet board today, I also have a quick guide document which runs through a description of each of the activity types if you're looking for that type of information. So what I'm going to do here to begin with is create a single slide Menti presentation. I'll give it a title up in the top, sample PD Menti. And the first thing that I want you to think about is that next to the title, there is a settings cog, which asks you to choose between a presentation and a survey. This is important in Mentimeter language because a presentation requires you to decide when you're going to start and stop this activity and when people can start engaging with it. If you want students to just be able to engage with it as soon as you give them the link, you have to change this to a survey. That is the difference between the two. The presentation is you choosing to run the activity and deciding when students can progress to subsequent questions and activities versus the survey, which is by far the most common way of using Menti, which is I've built it, I've got the link, I'm setting it free for you to engage with. But a lot of the time when people are saying the audience can't access the second question or it's not working for them yet, it's because people have left this on presentation, which relies on you to say, start this activity and now progress. So I would suggest the safe way to go with this tool until you're comfortable with it is switch to survey. Immediately it's saying, do I want people to be able to submit multiple times to the same activity? Yes or no, up to you, you can toggle that on. But this is the one of the more important choices you need to make when you set up a Menti. Okay, so I'm going to build a Menti, and at this point, when we add new slides, as we said, it asks you to choose between activity types, interactive questions. You can build content into Mentimeter if you want to use it like PowerPoint. You can even import PowerPoint slides into Mentimeter and build a deck inside this tool. But to be honest, most people don't use Menti like that. They build it to run interactives. And in a lot of cases, they're only building single slide presentations because they want that one activity to give to their students. So that's what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to make a word cloud. So there's my slide. It's given me the skeleton of this activity. What's my prompt for people in the word cloud? Let's go with really basic. How are we feeling about winter? There's a question. Then the word cloud is appearing underneath. I can make some adjustments to the colors being used. I can define how many responses I want people to make. I can change things like text color and things, basic stuff. But at the moment, this is how the word cloud is going to appear to students. And now you'll notice if you click anywhere else on the slide, we have the ability to customize this a bit more. I can add an image in the background if I wanted to. I can upload my own image, or I could just choose any of these ones that are in there. Crop it if you want to, alternative text. This is all kind of customization stuff. It's not that important for what we're talking about today. You can play around with it and figure it out. So what they're going to get when I give them the link is that image or prompt alongside the question that asks them to put in a response to how they're feeling about winter. There are a few other customization options if I want to change the layout of how this appears, things like background color. It's all just trimming really. But down the bottom, some important other prompts. The first one is, do I want to show them the instructions bar? And this is a second way that students can engage with Mentimeter. Up the top of this slide, you'll notice in fairly small writing in our editing view, you're able to join this activity at menti.com if you go there and put in that code. So for people that don't have a link to click on, or maybe even if they're in person or just on a mobile device and don't have access to somewhere where they could click a link, they could go to that address and put in that code. So that is a join code. So that we have a participant link, we have a joined code that we could give them. There is another option here for a QR code, which I could turn on. And at that point, it also drops a QR code onto the slide presenting, which means that anyone with one of these mobile devices, I know that Teams is blurring that out for some reason, but they could scan that either in person or online and do the Mentimeter activity as well. So we now have 3 ways of engaging with the Menti: a participant link, a join code, a QR code. There's 3. Let's have a look at where we go next from this. I've made my word cloud. I'm ready to start using it. I'm now going to go up to this area at the top called Share, and it's giving me a bunch of different participant information, like our participant link. Great, pretty important information. I could use that, drop it straight into the chat, and off we go. It's live, it's running. You could start putting responses into the word cloud if you wanted to. The QR code, for example, if we wanted to print it out and put it somewhere else, like in person, physically on campus somewhere, etc., for people to scan and use in a lecture theatre, whatever, I could download that image if I wanted to. The join code that we saw at the top of our slide actually has a time limit on it. By default, that code will change and refresh and update after 2 days. Your links and other things, they never change, but the join code will change, and you can choose whether or not you want that to be a longer period of time or just short, but you do need to be aware that if you're using that join code, that it will change every couple of days. It's a security measure. By default, participation is turned on, which means that people can join this, but if you wanted to set this as private and not to be able to be used currently, you could turn off participation. Then we also get the ability to embed the slides. So this is important for those of you who want to put Mentees into your subjects. So I'm going to click on this copy code, and I'm going to go into a Brightspace content area. Let's open, I'll get rid of that Teams bit and go learn CSU, give me a sandbox, that'll do. I'm going to find a content area. And I'm going to make a page, create a new page in Brightspace, and we'll go Menti activity. Now what I'm going to do, this is a tip for you, I'm going to type in the word text here and then go down a bit. This is where I want to put the Menti activity underneath. So I'm now going to use the insert stuff icon. Scroll to the bottom, it says enter the embed code. I can do that here. And now Control V to paste that code I just got from Menti. Next. Don't worry about this blocking of preview garbage. That's Brightspace pretending to be in charge. Hit insert. And there's my Menti word cloud sitting there on the page ready to be used. You'll notice at the moment that all it has at the top is that join link. So for me to get students to be able to engage with this, I need to give them that participation link that we were getting when we were building the activity. So let's jump back to Menti. Remember, top of the page, participation link that they click on to join. So I'm going to copy that. And that's the text that I'm going to give them at the top. That's why I did that. Right, to register your response, click on this link. Right, now I could either just paste it, or I could change this link to a hyperlink if I wanted to. Either or. And now they have a mechanism to vote and join the Menti and put in their responses, and a live update, which will show your responses as you put them in. So I'm done with that. That content is ready to roll. I have an embedded, interactive, now asynchronous audience engagement activity built into my content for students. And as soon as they start voting in the word cloud, it will appear on here and just keep updating. Robin, go ahead.
Sorry, you did it fast. When you made this link word a hyperlink, did you right click on it? How did you make that a hyperlink?
How did I make the word a hyperlink? Let me show you. So the answer is if you left click and drag any text in Brightspace, you get this little mini bar, and you'll notice there's a little chain icon right there. And that's how you change, put in your hyperlink there, and the text that you want on the page is underneath if you want to change that wording. There are about 6 ways to add links in Brightspace, but to be honest, this is the easiest. You type the text that you want on the page, left click and drag, then you get the chain.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, jumping back to Menti, we just provided 3 different ways for people to engage with the activity type. Participant link, we embedded it. We have a QR code if we want it. We have a join code as well. So there's multiple ways that we can get people involved. And right at the bottom of our share settings, there's also an area that you need to look at called access level. This is new. They've updated this interface recently, and the options that are in there are limited to participants, which means you need to present. Public is the one you probably want to use for this so that you can just set it free and they can engage with it without you needing to present it live. And then private, which means no one's engaging with this except for you. So keep in mind, make sure that that section down the bottom under access level is set to public. Okay, there is a second tab called collaborators if you're interested. And this is where if you wanted to add colleagues to be able to work on this and you'd built it in your own account. At that point, you could add their emails in here. And as long as they've signed up for Mentimeter, they're going to get an email saying, Robin's made this great Menti. She's added you as a collaborator. Click here to join it, edit it, and do things with it. So you can add collaborators like that, or you could build it in that shared workspace. All right, so what we've done there is build a single Menti activity that is live and cast out and ready to be used. And as people start voting on it, which maybe if let's me just click on that link for a second and put in a response, cold, submit. So there is at least one response. So we can see on our Menti now that's come straight through, but we now have some results. Let's go back to mentimeter.com to look at our results. We now get a tab up the top in our dashboard for our Menti saying this presentation has results. Most of the time what people are wanting at this point is one of two things, either to clear the results so we can use the Menti again. We can click on manage results and reset. We can get rid of it, clear it, the Menti's ready to be used again. Or you could just leave it running and keep adding to those results that are in there. The other thing that people want from this tool from time to time is the ability to actually download the results onto Excel, for example. So if they wanted to export them, you can do that as well. So at that point, I've opened up the results area and I can now download it as an Excel if I wanted to. So you can go into that overview section if you want to get some data out of your Menti into something like Excel. Keep in mind that by default, people engage with these tools anonymously. You give them a link, they put in their results. So there is no way for you to see who's putting what in this tool unless you're telling them to put their names into the tool. That's something to be aware of. So what we have done there is we've gone through a lightning tour of adding Mentimeter activities, either one or more. We've found out that we can share it and make it available to people through one of 4 different ways. We can embed it if we want to leave it asynchronously for it to run. And we also have the ability to set kind of controls and permissions around who can edit it, who can join it, who can access it, etc. So I'd really strongly encourage you to play around with your Mentimeter accounts and making different activity types to see how they behave. Inside each of your Mentis, you'll also notice that there is a preview function, which means that you are able to actually run through it as a participant to see how it appears and how it looks, etc. So that function is also available and it's up here next to share. At the top, you'll see a little eye icon that says preview. That will just show you how this activity is going to run for everybody without actually needing to join it in as a student in another browser or something like that. All right, so that is Menti in a lightning tour, and we have 15 minutes left to look at the Zoom toolset, which is fine because I think, broadly speaking, it needs less explanation. Drop things into the chat, and again, of course, I'm happy to hang around afterwards and chat to people about any of this stuff and more. Okay, let's talk about Zoom for audience engagement. I'm going to start this process by opening up my Zoom desktop application. So if you're on a CSU device, you'll see a Zoom icon there somewhere. If you can't find it on or you're on your own machine, type in Zoom into your search and it will open Zoom Workplace, which is the Zoom desktop application, which looks like that. This is probably familiar to you, I would hope. Okay, what we're looking at here is at the top of the Zoom desktop app, in the taskbar, we're looking for an area called Surveys. When we click on this area, Zoom has grouped its audience engagement tools all under this one label, surveys. But in fact, there are three different things we're talking about here: surveys, polls, and quizzes. In Zoom language, a survey is an asynchronous interactive activity or quiz that you can give to people without you needing to be there or even you needing to run Zoom at all. So you build it like a survey. So I would go in here and go, new survey, create a survey, start working through making the questions, and then it will give me a link to give to people to start putting their responses in. It is a survey tool that you don't need to be in Zoom to use. Right, so that's what it is. And the types of questions that you can put in are single choice, which in actual normal language is what we would call multiple choice. You choose from a number of options, but you get one choice. Then what Zoom calls multiple choice, which is in fact allowing you to choose multiple responses. So from the following list, choose one or more that apply to you, right? So you can choose multiple responses. It has a matching activity. It has a ranking activity. It allows you to capture short answer responses and long answer responses. And it also has a like it type response, a rating scale, or a fill in the blank. Some of these may be gimmicky to you and of no value. Others might be really valuable, but it is a tool that will allow you to quickly create an asynchronous survey. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to make two question types. One multiple choice. How would you describe, no, that's no good. How do you feel about winter? I'm on a real winter thing today. Multiple choice. I can choose my choices here. Great. Hate it. I can add more. Other, whatever. Right. So at that point, they've got the opportunity in here. I can add a description. I can add a title. But that activity is now there. I can add other questions if we like. I'll add one more. This time around, I'm going to change this to making an open response. This is something that people wanted in Zoom for the longest time. How do I capture student open responses around any question so that I can see their text responses without having to fish through the entire chat pod, for example? How do we do that? I'm going to make a short answer response. Describe briefly your feelings about winter. And you'll notice that it has a 200 character limit. And I can determine whether or not this is a must-do or a voluntary type question. These are the same types of options we work through when we make any survey. Okay, so I've got two questions in my survey. Now I've got some config options up here in the top corner. I can preview it if I want to run through it. I can look at the settings, but what I'm going to do here is hit save first. So this is now ready, and the first thing it does is give me a link, at which point I could choose, I could say that's hugely long, that link. I'm going to shorten the link, much shorter, copy that link, share it with the audience here in an email, in a live Zoom meeting, wherever you like. Asynchronous audience engagement, done, cast loose, without me needing to learn a whole new tool set. It's just built into Zoom, and I will be able to then access all of my surveys and all of my results through the Zoom Workplace desktop application. Really simple, really straightforward. You'll also notice it gives you the opportunity to add things like QR codes. Again, if you wanted to print those or put them around physically for people to scan and use and engage with. You can you embed Zoom surveys? That is an excellent question. Let's find out. We've got a QR code here. What else can I do? I'm going to hit done here and have a look at what my other options are for this untitled survey. If I go in to editing the questions, there is a settings area in the top right-hand corner which will allow me to further do things to this survey. What else can I do with it? At the moment, they're anonymous. Otherwise, I could turn that off and it would ask for people's names. Numbering questions. Do I want to give them an automated response for feedback? Fine. At the moment, I'm not seeing any embed options. Let's keep looking through. The short answer, I think, for this one is no. You can't embed Zoom surveys into content. it requires a hyperlink, Robin. I think that's, I haven't seen it anywhere before, but I wasn't really willing to bet on that.
So you'd have to send
Give
the
them
link as a
give them a
comms.
hyperlink, yeah.
Okay.
Or just paste the link into content somewhere. You could say, you know, this, you can access the survey through the following link. Like you could put the link into your content, but
Yeah,
by and
but it's
large,
not
it's
going to
going to be,
show it.
it's not physically going to show it to them. No, there are other survey tools which can do that, but yeah, I won't get into that right here and now. So basic Zoom survey, as many questions as you like, asynchronous, and you choose between those activity types. There's only a few in there for you to choose between, but most of the time what people are looking for is a multiple choice type question or open response. The other types of audience engagement that we have for Zoom require you to be running a Zoom meeting to use them. So at that point, we're talking about polls and quizzes. So I'm going to create a new poll or quiz. I can build it whenever I want to, but you can't use it and have the audience engage with it unless they're in a live Zoom meeting. So let's create a poll. And we go with, how do you feel about winter? Right, I'm going to give you the idea here. Great, awful, etc. This is an interesting option in Zoom live meetings is that you can also choose to create breakout rooms based on student responses. So if you were to give them a poll where they have to make a choice, and the choices they make will then create breakout rooms for everyone who's made that choice to go into that breakout. So it is a way of enrolling. So if I said, for today's activity, which of the following areas are you most interested in? And I've given them 4 options: summer, winter, autumn, whatever. They choose a response. It creates those breakout rooms and enrolls them into them. So it is a way of self-enrollment for breakouts as well, if you were to choose that option. But we'll make the poll, we'll save the poll. I can't do anything with Untitled Top Poll 4. I can't give people a link to it. I have to run a Zoom meeting, which is exactly what I'm going to do now. Launch a new Zoom meeting. Yeah. Let's get into it. Right, this is my live Zoom meeting going on here. And then what I'm looking for down the bottom as the person who created this poll is a polls quizzes tab. And it will give me a list of all of the polls that I have in my profile. And I can now launch that poll for everyone to engage with and vote on. When you hit with a poll or a quiz in Zoom, you hit launch, your participants will have this appear in front of them and they have to vote and choose their responses. You as the host get to see those responses. The audience does not get to see the results until you finish the poll and choose to share the results. Right, so I can hit end the poll, share the results. And then at that point, they can see those percentages. So that's the main kind of use case for Zoom polls and quizzes, is that you start sharing it as a live activity. They have to vote in it and choose their responses. And then once it's finished, you hit share results and then they can see them if you want to share them. Maybe you're just collecting the information, right? The difference between a poll and a quiz in Zoom, let's go back to our surveys area. When we choose between a poll or a quiz, the only difference is that a quiz has an identified right or wrong answer. That's it. So they have exactly the same question types for you to choose between. The only difference is when you set something as a quiz, it requires you to actually select the right answers, the correct answers. And it reduces the type of questions you can ask the students as well. So if I change this and said, actually, I want to make this a quiz, you'll notice that there is a button up in the top right-hand corner that says, make it a quiz. Turn it on. And you'll notice now with our questions that we can choose between, it's going to be asking us to identify next to each of our answers the correct answer. So if I ask them about winter again, and there was a correct answer, and then other things, I actually have to set the answer and choose which one of those it is. That's it. Exactly the same question types available, but it's asking you to identify where the correct response is. And again, you cannot use this unless you're running a live Zoom meeting, any Zoom meeting. So you can reuse these quizzes and polls anytime you run a Zoom meeting. You'll be able to find the surveys tab, open up the poll, launch the poll. It is fairly straightforward. It's not really a complex tool set for you to use, but you do need to understand that distinction between surveys, asynchronous, polls and quizzes during Zoom itself. So I can see that we've got 5 minutes to go. What I'm going to do here is close this Zoom room and have a look at my deck briefly to see if I've missed anything glaringly obvious. So we talked about Menti to begin with. We looked at our different Menti activity types. We looked at using Menti in a really structured, intentional way with 5 different activities, all giving you information about progress. We walked through the Menti dashboard. Then we looked briefly at Zoom, polls, quizzes, and surveys, the differences in the functionality. I have some other supporty type resources inside this deck if you're interested in watching other videos on using any of those tools as well. So look, I'm going to stop there. I will stop the recording as well, but I'm happy to discuss any of this more or anything else. But I will say at that point, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I will provide the Padlet link